I'm not teaching, I'm publicly learning, but hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 7, the Romans part 2, that is page 13, while doing trunk training. It is an unusual combination to learn and do sport at the same time, but you might give it a try. It's a learning method. If you are participating in the exercises, that is at your own risk, and I'm using this just under fair use for educational purposes. So the Romans. We already had that in the part 1, that in 55 before Christ, Julius Caesar tried with the Roman army to conquer Great Britain, but he didn't succeed. 100 years, for 100 years, Britain stayed separated from the Roman Empire. In 43 after Christ, Emperor Claudius invaded with his army Great Britain. At that time, even though there was resistance by some tribes, for example, the Iceni tribe in eastern England, led by their queen Boudica, which is honored through a statue on Westminster Bridge in London, near the House of Parliament. And it's a pretty long sentence, I guess. House of Parliament, and that invasion was successful even though there was resistance. So in 43 after Christ, Great Britain was occupied by Emperor Claudius of the Roman Empire. And where we're going on now with part 2. Areas of what is now Scotland were never conquered by the Romans. So, let's take just this sentence. We had just read that occupied almost all of Britain, but now we have Scotland. Areas of what is now Scotland were never conquered. So that is not almost Britain. It's actually a pretty big chunk of Britain, but I guess it had the green side about chapter 3. So what is the UK? So Scotland was not conquered. That's a pretty big part, but it's not almost. So areas of what is now Scotland were never conquered by the Romans. And the Emperor Hadrian, so it lacks a bit explanation here. The Emperor Hadrian was a Roman Empire, not a Britain Empire. Emperor Claudius or Julius Caesar, that were Roman emperors, and Emperor Hadrian was a Roman emperor. So Hadrian was a Roman, not a Briton. And the Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England to keep out the Picts, ancestors of the Scottish people. So that's a lot of information. First off, Emperor Hadrian was a Roman. That is not written here. That is very important, I guess. So Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England. There is no better explanation, I guess, also in the following sentences. I have to make another bookmark here. He built a wall in the north of England. He has not written if it is the north of England 2000 years ago or the today England. So there was in the north of England. If it is today, the north of England would be here. The north of England is here where it becomes Scotland. The blue part is Scotland. I guess 2000 years ago it was also England? I guess not. But we don't have further explanation, but I guess we don't need more. What is written here? Everything you need to study for British citizenship. Everything you need to study for the British citizenship test. So we don't need to know it. So, he built a wall. Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England to keep out the Picts. Well, the first exercise. You're breathing in. And out. Again in. And out. Again in. Out. Now closing the legs. And we can start the first exercise. Leg up. Right angle with the leg, flex foot, even light hips, hold the back. And now we're pressing against the knee with quite a lot of pressure. We're having a little bend in the elbow, even light hips, tall up with the back. And on the other side. The leg up, right angle with the leg, flex foot, even light hips, tall up with the back, and we're pressing against the top of the knee. And it was the first exercise. My next exercise, we're going into quarter squat. We're pressing against the knee, and we're going to the knee. And on the other side, and changing. And change. And the last time. And now a similar exercise. Leg up, right angle with the leg, flex foot, even line hips taller off the back. Now we're pressing, let's be inside. Little bend in the elbow, taller off the back, even line hips. And the other leg. Right angle with the leg, flex foot, even line hips taller off the back. Pressing against the knee. Little bend in the elbow. And back to what happened after the Roman occupation of almost Britain, but not Scotland. So, the Roman Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England to keep out the Picts, ancestors of the Scottish people. So here's written that in Scotland there are people living, and they are referred to here the Scottish people, and there were the Picts 2000 years ago in 43 after Christ, and the Emperor Hadrian. That's not written when Emperor Hadrian made that, because it was not in 43, I think, because there was Emperor Claudius. Around a bit after Christ, 2000 years ago, there were the Picts in Scotland, and these Picts, is written here, are the ancestors of the people who are living now in Scotland. So the Picts are the ancestors, so they're great fathers and mothers of the Scottish people. They're the Picts. And Emperor Hadrian built a wall to separate, what was it in here? To keep out the Picts. Included in the wall were a number of forts. So there was not just a big wall out of, I know that some parts are still standing and they are made out of stone, but I'm pretty sure there was wood also. So there was a wall. It's not, seems not to be important out of what this wall was, but it was not just a wall, but there were forts. And forts, we have to know what a fort is to understand the text, even though it's not explained here, I guess. Maybe a little. A fort is basically a little place where more soldiers are in a place. It's a bit like a castle, but more like a tower. No, a fort is bigger. A fort is bigger. A fort is not just a tower. A fort is actually a camp. Let's not go into military words. Let's read on. It's a place where more soldiers are together. So it's not just a wall, but there is also a place arranged where more soldiers can live. If there are now 50 or in a little camp or a tower with just a few, or if it's actually a fort is bigger. A fort can have 100 or 200 people, but it's not, it doesn't have to be a real camp. I guess I'm getting way too far into military talk. So there were forts, and forts is a place where a bunch of soldiers can be. Included in the walls were a number of forts, so places where more soldiers are stationed. Parts of Hadrian's wall, so of the Roman Emperor Hadrian, it's the Hadrian's wall. Parts of Hadrian's wall included the forts of Hausesteads, 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 and Vindolanda. And they can still be seen. So Hausesteads and Vindolanda, which are forts along of the Hadrian wall in the north of England, which was built by the Emperor Hadrian to keep out the Picts, which are the ancestors of the Scottish people, are still visible. So Hausestead and Vindolanda, I guess Vindolanda. Hausesteads and Vindolanda. The next exercise. We're having the arms, we're going down into full squat, the arms out at the side, the propeller exercise. We're going down to one side, we're pressing against the leg and looking up to the other. And back into the middle, down and press against the leg and look up to the other end. Back into the middle, and we're done with the propeller. Now the last exercise in standing, and one leg standing, riding with the leg flex foot, even line hips off the back, and we're pressing against the knee with a little bit in the elbow. And now we are opening, and we are closing again. And on the other side, we are rushing a bit for trunk training. And that was that exercise. So, Emperor Hadrian built the Hadrian Wall, and two forts are there still visible, which are Hausesteads and Vindolanda. It is a popular area for walkers, and in the UNESCO World Heritage Site. UNESCO is an acronym that means every letter of that word, or it doesn't have to be necessary for an acronym every letter, but in this case it's a or, means a word. So the UNESCO, these are the letters UNESCO, they stand for United, where the U, United Nations, where the N, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. So it is a popular area for walkers. Walkers are people who are walking with their legs around as a leisure activity. Well, it is a popular area. I guess we mean the Hadrian's Wall, not the two areas of Hausestetten and Vindolanda, then this would be plural. But we are taking what is written here. So there are the forts, Hausestetten and Vindolanda, and something of Hadrian's Wall, or the two forts, Hausestetten and Vindolanda, which are still existing today, there were more forts, are a popular area for walkers, and this area, it is a popular area, the north of Scotland, the north of England. Something is a popular area. Now it can be these two forts, Hausestetten and Vindolanda. It can be the Hadrian's Wall, but if it's over 100 kilometers or something long, it goes through the whole thing of between Britain and Scotland to keep out the Picts. So it's 100 kilometers or something. Is that area part? Is the Hadrian's Wall, or is the area, or the two forts? Something of that. Let's say the Hadrian's Wall. That makes the most sense. The Hadrian's Wall is way bigger as just a fort, and the fort along the Hadrian's Wall, for military purposes, is part of Hadrian's Wall. So the forts are part of Hadrian's Wall. So I guess if someone would give United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization World Heritage Site, what is the word? If someone declares it as that, then they don't just take a fort, which still stands. So I guess the Hadrian's Wall, or the area of the Hadrian's Wall, is part of the UNESCO World Heritage. So the Hadrian's Wall are named after the Emperor Hadrian, who had built it to keep out the Picts, who are the ancestors of the Scottish people. This Hadrian's Wall is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So that means that it is seen as World Heritage. World and heritage means that it's the heritage, the word is the word. That means what we have left from human history. We, as the people living today, have this as a heritage from our ancestors. And this Hadrian's Wall is seen by this UNESCO organization that this is part of the history of humanity. The Romans remained in Britain for 400 years. They built roads and public buildings, created a structure of law, and introduced new plants and animals. That is a long sentence. The Romans remained in Britain for 400 years. So 400 years. They came in 43 and they stayed for 400 years. They built roads, so to drive on, not with a car, but maybe with a historical car, so a car wagon, not with an electric or diesel or benzene car, okay, gasoline car. So they built roads and public buildings. What does that mean, public buildings? It's not explained here. We seem not to be a necessity to know it. They built public buildings and roads and created a structure of law. That was here one of the big five of Great Britain, the values and principles of UK: democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, tolerance of those of different faiths and beliefs, and participation in community life. So the rule of law, number 2 of the big fives. They created a structure of law. So the Romans, who came in 43 and stayed for 400 years, did not only roads and public buildings, but they made a structure of law and introduced new plants and animals. Plants, now I get the word. Plants does mean plants, the things, the green things which are growing everywhere in the soil. I thought something about there was so much in electric. So they built plants. They brought plants. They did not build power plants or something. They brought plants, so vegetation. And animals. So they brought animals and plants, and they built roads and public buildings and structural law. They created a structure of law. And it was during the 3rd and 4th centuries after Domini that the first Christian communities begin to appear in Britain. That's the last important point, and we're ending with the Romans. So in the 3rd and 4th centuries after Domini, the Romans did for 400 years. So through the 0th century for the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and I guess at the beginning of the 5th, this is for 400 years. So they stayed during the 3rd and 4th century, when the Romans were there, the first Christian communities began to appear. So from Christianity, religion, Christianity. The first Christian communities began to appear in Britain. So in the 3rd and 4th century, the first Christian communities began to appear in Britain. Bis hierhin, I thank you very much, and until next time.